Hello, everyone, and welcome to Christian Fiction Fans Book Club. We are here tonight with Madelyn Smith, the author of Every Heart Prepare that we just read. And let me tell you a little bit about Madelyn. Madelyn is a wife, mom, and storyteller who writes sweet romances filled with faith, humor, and heart. From laugh out loud rom-coms to heartfelt historicals, her stories celebrate sweet and clean romance. A member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Madelyn finds inspiration in her faith and strives to write stories that bring people closer to Christ. She's obsessed with reading, no surprise. She tries to find time to make crafts with her kids and bake delicious things, and she lives with her husband and two children in Idaho. So welcome, Madelyn.
Thanks. So happy to be here.
Yeah. All right. Well, I am ready to get into some questions with you. So, would you just start by telling us a little bit about your background and your journey to becoming an author? Is this something you always wanted to do, or how did it all come about?
That question makes me laugh quite often because so many of my friends have said, I wanted to be an author my whole life. I did not. I grew up reading, I devoured books, I loved reading since I was little. And I always thought, I just don't have any ideas. Like, it'd be cool to be an author, but I just don't have any ideas
Yeah.
for anything, right? And so I just devoured books. And then when I had my two babies 15 months apart, and during both pregnancies, I read like a book a day, at least a book a day. And it was crazy. And after having my second child, I was like, I need some social outlet. I'm home alone with two kids under the age of 15 months. I need something. And so eventually I found Bookstagram, the bookish side of Instagram, and joined and started sharing reviews. Um, I'm very passionate about clean reads. And so I started out my account as the squeaky clean reader, and I found all these friends and all these authors and more clean romance authors. And I looked at all of them and I'm like, hold on, they're like me, like they're moms with kids. I could probably do something like that. And so it was only a few months after I started my account that I started feeling like I should write a book. And I had no ideas. I was like, I got nothing. I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna write. I like fantasy, I like romance, I don't know. And so I was out, it was like May of 2023, and I was out pushing my son on the swings. And, they're quiet because they were little and they're just enjoying swinging. And so I was just praying in my head. And I was like, Heavenly Father, will you just send me an idea? Like just one. I'll just write one book, just one idea. And immediately I had an idea for a fantasy book. And so I texted my husband, I voice texted him while I'm pushing my son on the swings, my idea. And then that night, like I looked up some different writing programs. I found one I wanted to use and I just wrote out like the outline for the story. And then I started writing. I think I got like 10,000 words into it. And I was like, this is really complicated. It was a fantasy book. It was way more complicated than I was ready to jump into. Um, and then I decided, oh, let me try writing a rom-com. So I started writing a rom-com. I got probably about 20,000 words into it. And then I was like, this isn't really where I want to go to. So then it was fall by that point, like September. And I'm talking to my husband, and we had just watched the movie Cars with Lightning McQueen and Sally because my son was in his Cars era. And I had read Townshipped by Savannah Scott, which is like a small town amnesia story. And I told my husband, I said, somebody should make the movie Cars into a romantic comedy. It would be super funny. It'd be awesome. Like real life instead of cars, right? It'd be great. It has a great plot line. And he's like, no, it'd be okay. And I'm like, but what if he got amnesia? And my husband said, oh, I hate amnesia trope. And I said, I'm gonna write it out of spite. And that's the book. That was my first book. It fueled me to prove him wrong that I could write a good amnesia trope. And since then, the ideas have not stopped coming, and they just keep flowing. And I have like four books going at once. I just have so many ideas. So
So,
that's how I got started.
That's amazing. So, from the time you got the idea for that Cars book until it was published, how long was that?
So I wrote the book between September and December, so about 4 months.
Hmm.
And then I published it the next May. So I was doing edits, beta reads,
Wow.
January, February, March, April, and then I published in May.
That's
So
super, super fast, especially for your first book. Like,
I had a lot of help. I think I'm really grateful I started a Bookstagram first
mhm,
because I got to know the indie author process through my friends,
yes.
right? And I figured out marketing and I figured out what I
Hmm.
wanted to do. So it just all came together super fast. And I'm still my problem is once I'm done with a book, I can't sit on it. I'm like, it's done, let's go. Let's publish it super fast. Let's go. So like I've had a fantasy book done since October and I'm not releasing it till January and it's driving me bonkers. I'm like, it needs to be out in the world already. But anyways, that's a whole nother story.
Fun. So, how many books have you written now, and where does Every Heart Prepare kind of fall in line with all those books?
All right, so I have to count this out on my fingers because I can't ever remember. Excuse me.
Mhm.
So the first one was Winning My Queen, and then I wrote a
Which I have
novella.
right here.
Yes. Here, I've got all my books. I'll just hold them up as I go. This will make it easier. Okay, so my first one was Winning My Queen. And then I wrote a novella that I gave away for free for my newsletter, which was Romances in a Fantasy Book. And then I wrote Loving Our Collision. And then I actually wrote a fantasy book that's not published yet. I'm actually editing that right now. So I have a first draft done. It's in edits. So I wrote another book in between Loving Our Collision. And then I had a deadline with Amazon. So I hurried up and wrote Romances in a Country Song. And then oh, and then I wrote my fantasy book First Hunter after Romances in a Country Song because I was procrastinating writing Every Heart Prepared. I wrote this one. And so then I wrote this one this summer. And then I wrote um, Christmas Wishes and Accountant Kisses. And then I wrote Lady Scarlet. So whatever number that ends up being, that's how many. But this is the order of them. Is like that.
Oh, we have six out right now. And
Mm-hmm.
then the
One, two, three.
fantasy number seven comes in January.
Yep. So number 7 and 8 come out in January. So 7 is a full length, and then eight's another novella. So,
And what is the time frame from Winning My Queen until now?
so I've only been published for a year and a half.
That is
So the
insane.
It's pretty crazy. Now, I have to say, these are like I've written 4 novellas, so they are shorter. No, 5 novellas. 5 novellas. So they're like a third of the length of my full lengths. So it
Hmm.
takes a little less time. I can get through the publishing process faster,
Sure.
but they also are a little bit harder because you have to condense like a novel's worth of character growth into a third of the length of a book. So
So you have gone the indie publishing route. Was there ever a moment when you thought, I'm going to try and get a traditional publishing deal, I'm going to query? You've always been indie is the way to go.
I love indie authors. I read indie authors like almost exclusively, except for like 3 or 4 traditionally published authors who I follow their releases religiously. Um, it's basically been indie authors for me because they write what I want to read. They write clean, they write no swearing, they write the romance that I like. Most of them will have Christian themes or allegories in them. Um, and yeah, and so especially once I joined Bookstagram, it was like all indie authors. And I love the control of being an indie author. I get to choose
Yeah.
my own cover. I get to choose my own release dates and timelines and everything. Like, yes, you put in the money up front, but you get more of your royalties
Right.
afterwards.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, but honestly, the way indie and traditional is going these days, traditional authors are now asked to help market their own books.
Yeah.
Like the publishers aren't doing it all themselves anymore. And so, I'm learning all these skills so that if I do go chat one day, who knows, I will have already built up a loyal fan base that I can bring with me to the deal. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. I'm just in awe of how you've done all of that. So the first novel you said it took about 3, 4 months to write. Now, how long
hmm
would you say it takes you to write a novel?
Um, it depends. It depends on how invested I am in my story. I think the fastest I wrote, and here's the other thing, I underdraft my first draft. So I will get my first draft done, and it will usually be about half the word count. And then I
Okay.
do a major edit, and then it usually doubles in word count.
Hmm.
So the fastest I've written a first draft was 12 days within a 16-day period. I wrote for a spinster, my
Wow.
fantasy book. Um, that was the fastest I've ever written. Now, usually I can have a draft that I'm ready to give to an editor or beta reader within 3 or 4 months.
Hmm.
And that's usually between jumping. Now that I have my fingers in all my cookie pots,
Yeah,
I'm jumping between my stories, right? So, uh, yeah, 3, 4 months, and then it's done. If I'm focusing on just one, I can get a first draft and most of my second draft edits done in a month or two,
that's
and we're all good.
remarkable. Yeah.
It
So,
also just depends on the length. My longer ones take longer. So,
sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So I also happen to know a little bit about you because we've met in real life and had real
yes,
life
we did.
conversations. So, would you share with us your college major? Because I think that contributes a little bit to your indie desires.
Yes, it does. So I went to LDS Business College, which is now called Ensign College. And I got an associate's degree in project management. And I did a lot of event planning, and then I went and had an internship with Family Search and did a lot of coordinating of things, events, stuff like that. So I love planning things. I love having a schedule and having things organized. And then I finished and got my bachelor's degree in applied business management through BYU's online program. So I'm very much a techie person. I've been on computers like my whole life. So that helps a lot with marketing and computer stuff. I type really fast. I'm a very fast typer. Um, so that definitely helps a lot with this is because being an author, once you put on your author hat, you're a business owner. And
Yes.
so you have to plan all these business things and fill out tax forms and keep track of your finances. And I love my little accounting spreadsheet I have where I get to put in my daily numbers of sales and things. And then I ran a Kickstarter for my fantasy book, and that was a ton of project management, and I just savored every minute. It was so fun. Now, a lot of people won't say that, but I will because I thought it was fun. So I think that totally has influenced the joy that I take in being an author.
Definitely. I know that a lot of authors are just writers, they're like English majors. So then when they have to transition to the running a business side of thing, it's really difficult and the marketing side of things. But you already had that business background and that project management background. And so I think that's been probably a big key to your success that you've seen.
I I agree. And one of the things I was talking with a friend, and we were talking about this, how a lot of people will go to college and they'll take writing classes. The only writing class I took was how to write a resume in business letter. Like it was literally resume writing class. This is the only writing class I took in college. Like that's it. So the whole writing craft aspect is probably my weakest aspect. Like I hire editors for a reason.
I also think that being a reader helps you understand story structure and character development just kind of intrinsically. And if
Yep.
you were saying you can read a book a day, then yeah, you've absorbed a lot of that without taking a formal
hmm
class. And you might not be able to put a name to every technique, but it's just kind of how the story should go because you read so many of them, I'm imagining.
I agree. That's something I've had a discussion with my friend Rachel quite often, is that because she and we've read hundreds of books in the
Mm,
past. Like my Goodreads account is from like 2020 onwards, and I have read over 1,000 books and listed them on Goodreads. And so I do think that, most writers say your first million words are just practice. I say your first 1,000 books prepare you to write a book. That's what I think because I do think that I've read enough in both of the genres that I write that I know personally what tropes I like, the type of pacing I like, what plot twists do I enjoy, what do readers like, what are my pet peeves, what are other reader pet peeves, which, being on Bookstagram before I started writing, I could kind of be in that reader space and really understand what my audience likes, what they don't like, and then naturally it just comes out. Like I don't really have a problem outlining a story. I know the beginning, the middle, the end, and lots of the major key points. And then I just fill in the pieces between. And I think it's because, like you said, I naturally have developed the story structure in my mind. I know how it's supposed to go.
yeah.
Just magically. Just magic.
Yes. I love it.
No, it was a lot of books. It was a lot of books.
Yes. So the other thing we haven't talked about is you are a stay-at-home mom with two preschoolers. How old are they?
So my son just turned 5 in November, and my daughter turns 4 in February. So
So
they're really close in age.
little. And so how do you find the time to write so many books when you are also taking care of little people?
Okay, well, I have learned I can't write during the day unless I have specifically like turned on a movie and get them situated. And I say I'm taking the next hour. That's it. But I really try not to write during the day just because the distractions are too much. So
Yeah.
I do a lot of my admin tasks during the day, social media marketing, emails, stuff like that, that I can do in the quiet moments now when they're playing quite independently. I
Mhm.
have a lot more time to do that. Like just this morning, we have our kitchen table, our Christmas tree, and then the front living room. So I'm sitting in our kitchen table doing emails, figuring out taxes for an event that I just did, and they're playing a mixture of Lion King, How to Train Your Dragon, and Wild Kratts mixed together in their imagination in the front
Yes.
room with all their animal stuffies. So now they're at an age where I can do that. But when they were younger, um, nap times when they first took naps. I would write during nap times. And then I stayed up really late for the last year. I write at night and I just pray and I'm like, Heavenly Father, help me write the words and
Yeah.
we'll make it work. And yeah, I don't get enough sleep is probably the biggest answer.
Well, kind of like when you bring a new baby home, they say sleep when the baby sleeps. So maybe you need to nap when the kids nap because you're up so late writing.
Right, right. Now they don't nap anymore. So it's just
Ah,
like,
darn
we just
it.
survive. I
But
love
you're
you.
just a hop, skip, and a jump from them going off to school. So
Yes, the
that
5-year-old goes to school next year, and then my
that
daughter goes
could,
the year after that. So
yeah,
we'll see.
free up
We'll
a little
see.
more time. Um, so this book really intrigued me because I read that your personal genealogy inspired the story. And you do have an author's note at the beginning of that, which we read. But can you just talk to us about that? Like, how did you come up with
Yes.
this crazy story from some names on a page?
Yeah, so I love family history work. I am the family historian in my family for my mom and my dad's side. I love to add pictures to family search to find their stories. We were just over for Thanksgiving at my grandparents' house, and I pulled out my phone, recorded my grandma telling stories about like her favorite Thanksgiving memory. So I've always enjoyed family history work. And last year, a year or two ago, I was at my grandma's house. She lives like 2 miles down the street from me. Um, and she has all these documents that she needs help scanning into Family Search so that everybody can see them. And so I was helping her scan them and reading them as I was scanning. And I was really fascinated. This was my third great grandpa, so her great great grandpa. And we don't have any pictures of Leroy. Well, his name's William. We don't have any pictures of William or Cecilian. And I was really sad. I have pictures of their kids. I have pictures of their son and his wife. And then we have all these documents about him. And they tell just these little snippets of William, William Leroy Marshall Augustus Lovelady. That's his full name. It's really long. And so you just get these little snippets about him, and they just really intrigued me. And one of the things that really intrigued me was he told he never really talked about fighting in the Civil War. Like his grandkids say that he didn't say anything about it, except for one story that he told, which was it was after the siege on the Vicksburg, I believe. Don't quote me if I'm wrong. But he was so hungry that he saw a ham bone on the ground, covered in flies, and he picked it up and gnawed what he could off of it. He was that hungry. And that's the only story he told. And then it went on to talk about how he became a Methodist preacher in Texas and how his door was always open to anyone. They would always have guests at the dinner table. He just tried to be very Christian, and that was something that was instilled in the family. They have all been very devout Methodists in my family history. And I just, the sad thing was there's no stories about his wife. There's nothing about his wife. And that's just has always been so tragic to me. And so I was invited to participate in a multi-author series that I eventually left due to author drama. But the whole theme was tell a historical fiction story with a theme of a sacred Christmas carol. And so I chose Joy to the World. Um, and I thought, let's go with this ancestor. Let's make up his love story. I've got these bits and pieces. Let me piece something together. Let me just, pray about it, weave in the carol Joy to the World with some of the Christian themes and just go for it. And so that's how that story was born.
So all you really knew was he had been in the Civil War. He was a traveling preacher or a preacher in
Hmm.
Texas, and his name and his wife's name.
Yep. So I did find when I was researching last year, last Christmas time, I did find a record and I was so excited. It was a newspaper from, I'm gonna blank on where it's on the name of it, but there's a town and it doesn't exist any longer because once the railroad came through the town, basically Cotton Gin, that was it, Cotton Gin. The town disappeared, but they had a newspaper, and in the newspaper, I found a clipping where it says like W.M. Lovelady, leatherworking, like come get your leatherworking. He can do saddles, do all these things. Like he's announcing his business. And I
Uh-huh.
was like, hey, that's my ancestor. That's William Leroy Marshall. That's a Lovelady. Like it's the same initials and everything in the
Yeah,
right place at the right time. And so I knew that he could do leatherworking, which I tied into the story that Leroy works with leather, right? And he
yeah.
makes Cecilia a bracelet. So that's all I had. And I knew the place where they lived at that time. I knew where he was born, their rough ages. I changed it a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, and I knew like her name. I knew that something about them meeting, like they just were Christians and fell in love. That's all I got.
Yeah,
So I took the little bits I had and I
right. Just
made up my own story.
created something new. And in the
Yep.
story, Cecilia's mother is no longer with them. Did you know that from dates, or is that just a fabrication also?
That part's a fabrication, but I do. So she had a daughter before she married my ancestor. I knew
Okay.
nothing about this. And there's nothing. It's so infuriating that there's nothing about her. But I did make up that the mother died. But I think it's because we don't like I know nothing about her
Yeah.
parents. And I knew that I wanted a theme of grief to tie them
Hmm.
together. And I was like, the easiest way to do this is to get rid of a parent.
Yeah.
So I just kind of made that
And
up. But
right. And very believable for that time frame on the wild frontier. People just did
yeah.
not live as long. So So in your mind, as you were making this story, did you create a story to fit the characters that you had in your mind, or did you create characters to fit the story that you had in your mind?
Both.
Okay.
Okay. I am not super character driven,
Uh-huh.
but I'm also not stuck to my plot. So I made these characters, I kind of outline my story and I have my plot points that I want to have happen. But I've discovered that I'm in between being a plotter and a discovery writer. So I plot out my rough outline, I get a little bit of my characters together, and then I just kind of let them go and I figure out, okay, this is what needs to happen in this chapter. This is what needs to happen in this chapter. Let's get from point A to point B, you know? And so I kind of let them go. And so like things like um I'm trying to think of like things that okay, so like Cecilia gets mad and she burns dinner, right? That was not in my plot point plan. She just kind of decided to do that. And I was like, I would do that too. So this is fine. Or like Leroy having PTSD. I knew that I wanted him to have a little bit, but some of the PTSD scenes later on, those just kind of came. And then it kind of helped develop Jonathan a little bit. And the dad changed quite a bit in between my first and my second draft. And yeah, like they just kind of grow into who they are all the way. I don't know. I got nothing official.
Yeah,
It just happens.
that totally works. I love it. So sometimes there's a little piece of the author in her characters. Is there a little piece of you that is like Cecilia or Leroy?
I get mad. Cecilia gets mad. I just wanted her to, you know, she's independent and she's mad that like her dad wants to matchmake her, but at the same time she's like, but I do want to fall in love with him. He's cute, So it's just a little bit of that like I want to be a strong independent woman, but I also don't mind if he wants to take care of me. That's very much me. That's
Uh-huh.
very my husband is like, are you a strong independent woman today? Or do you want me to help out? And I'm like, I don't know, both. But I'm both. I'm both. So I think that's probably like the biggest vibe that we share.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So your first books have all been contemporary in your novellas, and
Mhm.
now this was your first historical fiction, correct? Did you
Yes.
have to do a lot of historical research to figure out like what actually happens in this time frame in the rugged Texas West?
Yeah, I might write one more historical, but I probably won't write very many.
Yeah.
Just because it does take more research, and my brain wants to move on so fast that it doesn't want to sit down to do research.
Yeah.
That's probably my biggest author flaw, which is why I made a whole rom-com series about authors who don't want to do research and then they
Uh-huh.
have to pay for it. It feels very real to me. And so like I don't know, like I had to research like what does a kitchen in a ranch house in 1870 Texas look like? Like
Right.
I don't know. I don't know what these things look like. I'm just imagining stuff from other westerns I've read and I'm like, there's Texas, and then I'm like, what about Christmas? Does it snow? I have no clue. I've never been to that side of Texas before. I had no clue. So I did a lot of Google Maps, I did a lot of research, I did a lot of reading old newspapers. And then I called it good and I told my editor who loves historical fiction, I said, if I did anything major wrong, please let me know. I'm done with this book. I don't want to do work on this anymore. I'm done.
Right.
So,
And so
yeah.
now the next book that comes out is fantasy, which is a completely different genre. How has that been different in writing fantasy compared to contemporary or historical?
Well, I just had a review today that's making me chuckle. It's a 5 star, so I'm happy that she liked my
Uh-huh.
fantasy book. But she did say that I use a little bit more modern terminology than she prefers in her fantasy books. So I just have to laugh at that because I totally wrote it in between writing two rom-coms, and
Yeah.
I just wrote it. I like word vomited that fantasy story. And so yeah, there are a few more modern terms in it, but it's also fun because I can just not do research and just pretend that magic fixes everything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
that's
I'm
true.
like, I don't have to know how to stitch up a wound. The magic can heal the wound. Magic, like I don't have to learn that. And so
So
I
less
think it's
research and more imagination.
yes, yes. And it has its place. I'm a mood reader, so I usually jump between fantasy and contemporary. And so it's nice to let my brain have a break about thinking about like so before I wrote my fantasy, well, in between writing my and editing my fantasies, I wrote Christmas Wishes and Accounts and Kisses, which is just set in Boise, Idaho, right? And so I had to be like, okay, what's traffic like at 7 p.m. in Boise on a Friday night?
Yeah,
Let me think about the logistics if they're getting and so I don't really have to think about that with fantasy. And it's kind
yeah.
of really nice. And yeah, it's two different vibes, two different parts of my personality, and I really like being able to bounce between the two. They both fill my cup in different ways. So
That's really cool and really amazing. So tell us a little bit about how your faith influences your writing.
my favorite topic then. It's my favorite. Okay, I always okay, let me just start at the beginning. When I wrote Winning My Queen, I was just going to have it just kind of be generally like no religious themes involved in it. And then I got to the chapter where Mama T comes in, and all of a sudden she appears in my mind as a Southern lady preaching about prayer as I'm writing. I'm like, okay, this is Oregon. This is not where this happens. But it just came to me and I was like, okay, we're gonna talk about prayer and I'm gonna go with writing Christian rom-coms. And just ever since it's just been like my characters either talk about Christ or they live Christian values. And it was really fun to write Every Heart Prepare and really dive deep into the Christian themes and have the characters talk about Christ. And then my magic systems and my fantasy books are based on light and on faith. And it's been really fun to be able to make like a deity persona who represents Jesus Christ
Yeah,
and to have them draw closer to him in ways that, aren't normal because it's a fantasy world, right?
yeah.
But it's fun. It's researching my characters and like what issues they have and what they need to overcome helps me know what to research in my own scripture study. And so then I can pull those thoughts into maybe what another side character says, like Jonathan when he's asking about, um, how do you know what God's plan for you is? What and those types of questions. And so then how would it's a lot of thinking about how would I respond if I was this guy with this experience in life and it's really helped strengthen my faith in a unique way and I really enjoy it.
That's neat. So, how does faith play a part in this story? I mean, obviously, we have a Methodist preacher who's the main character, so that's pretty clear that faith is important. But how did you
Yeah.
put faith in this story?
So with the song of joy to the world, I really wanted them to focus on who brings true joy to the world, and that's Jesus Christ.
Hmm.
And true joy can be found when we turn to our Savior and when we turn our life over to Him and we let God prevail. And so Leroy comes in and he is firm on the path of I'm a traveling preacher. My job to redeem the mistakes that I made is to bring other people to Christ. That's it. That's what I know. That's the only thing that's going to help me overcome these deep feelings of guilt and shame, right? And so through the story, he grows and he learns that I can feel joy outside of preaching about Jesus Christ. I'm I've repented, I've changed. The Lord has forgiven me. He's letting me have this opportunity to have a family, to, really keep the Lord's commandment to Adam and Eve, get married and multiply and replenish the earth, right? And then Cecilia, she's been dealing with this grief of losing her mom. And she's like this, kind of, I feel forgotten. Does God care? Nobody was falling in love with me. I have no husband. I'm a spinster in Texas. This guy that I'm really attracted to is like, nah, I'm not gonna marry you because I gotta go do this. Like, what? So kind of just this, and then themes of forgiveness for her when she gets hurt from some conversations. And so just trying to help both of them really grow in the knowledge that when you turn to God and turn your life over to Him and let His plan be the plan for your life, that's when you're going to find true joy and really know what to do with your life.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So I'm
So,
curious if you've have ever had a moment like that in your own life where you kind of had your plan and like, this is the direction I'm going, and then suddenly you're feeling pulled in a new direction and realizing you kind of have to let go of one dream to follow God's plan.
yeah, actually, I really did. So when I was 18 and I in college, I was like, I'm gonna go on a mission. I'm gonna do a year of school. I'm gonna turn 18. I'm gonna go on a mission. I have a September birthday, so I graduated when I was 17. I turned 18 the day I moved out of my house to go to college. So I had a year before I could go because the mission age was 19. Um, and so I did my year, and that summer I was praying and praying and praying, and my whole life I wanted to go on a mission. And I went on trek the summer before I went to college, and I was like, yeah, I'm feeling the spirit. I need to go on a mission. This is what I need to do. So I just been mission, 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 mission. And then that summer I was praying, and I remembered a piece of revelation I had received the summer before. Um, and that revelation was prepare to go on a mission, but the way that you prepare is the way that you would prepare to go on a mission or to get married. That the preparation is the same because you're preparing to go to
Yeah.
before you do either of those things, right? So I had gotten that piece of revelation, I wrote it down, just kind of like put it on the shelf, right? And so that summer I remembered that. And then I prayed and I said, am I supposed to go on a mission? And the spirit said, no. I was like, what? My whole life's this is not what I wanted. I want to go on a mission, right? But then, so that second year, I met a boy, and then he moved to Arizona. So we long distance dated, and then everything lined up. I got a job in Arizona. My schooling was done, my internship was done. So I moved to Arizona in July in the summer, which is a horrible decision, really. It's
Yeah,
horrible.
Arizona in the
I am an
summer.
Idaho girl. I'm an Idaho girl. I like being cold. I like winter and fall. It's my favorite season. So July in Arizona was horrible. And 3 weeks, no, 3 days after I moved there, we broke up. And I was like, what? And but the spirit said, you're gonna meet your husband in the temple. I was working a job in the temple. And and I met my husband in the temple. 2 months later, he walked in to be an orange worker, and I was like, "That boy be cute." And so then a few weeks later, we like ran into each other, and then we started talking. He asked me out, and then eventually we got married. While I was 20, so
Wow.
like I wouldn't have even been home from a mission in the time that we had met, got
Yeah.
married. And he was never gonna leave Arizona, Deb. That man is an Arizona boy. He would have never left there. But you know who would move to Arizona was me. And so the Lord knew that if we were gonna get together, he had to move me to Arizona.
Yeah.
So I really drew on that experience of like, what? But you told me this was the plan. And
Right.
now it's not the plan?
Right.
What plan is the plan?
Yeah.
So that's that story for you.
And evidently you got your Arizona boy to move to Idaho, though.
I did. He loves me. He loves me, Dad. No,
Uh,
he's chill. He's like, it's fine. I miss Arizona a little bit, but I was miserable in Arizona. So he's like,
yeah.
you're happy, I'm happy. And I agree.
Oh, funny. So I would like to open it up to the other people on the call today. Does anybody have questions for Madeline about her writing career or about the book that we read?
I have two questions. My first question is, you had mentioned in the beginning, you had said, oh, that when you were pregnant, you were reading one book a day, you devour books and that your Goodreads, you've read, thousands of books, right? My question is, do you still read a lot or does it get confusing? Because you've written so many books in such a short amount of time that did you have to stop reading? Because does it get confusing when especially because you said that you're writing the fantasy book
Different genres.
in between the rom-com, and so like you already have different stories going on in your mind that you're writing. How can you read? That's what I was curious about. Do you still read or not as much, or yeah?
That is a great question. So when I first started writing, I was still reading quite a bit. I would read probably about 12 to 24 books a month when I first started writing. And I learned pretty quickly that I can't read the genre that I'm writing. So if I'm writing a rom-com, I can't read rom-coms at the same time because I would fall into imposter syndrome and I'd be like, I'm never gonna be as funny. I'm never gonna write swoony kisses like this woman can. My plot is not even half as good, right? So that little imposter syndrome was like, so I learned that I couldn't read it at the same time. And now I've learned I write in phases now. I will do 2 or 3 weeks where I just bust out a bunch of writing. And then there's about 2 or 3 weeks where I just have to kind of refill my cup. I'll do some admin tasks instead of writing. And that's when I'll read. Lately, I've been reading quite a bit less. I think in October, I only read one book. This week, I actually read an early copy of a book for another author. The other thing that changed was I started to read early copies of other authors' books to help give feedback. So I do a lot of that, and that takes up more time because it's more time consuming because I'm thoroughly evaluating every sentence. When I read, I skim descriptions. Don't tell anybody. I'm horrible at like landscape descriptions. If someone starts describing landscape, I'm like, next paragraph. Because I don't really care about that stuff when I'm reading. I'm more about the characters, their interactions. So that's actually something I have to go back in and add into my first drafts. Most of my first drafts is the characters' interactions, and then I have to go back in and add scene descriptions. So I don't read quite as much. I will if I'm sick. I will usually binge a series. I'll read 5 or 6 books over the course of a few days because I'm just sitting on my couch with my Kindle, making sure my kids don't completely destroy the house. But once I started writing, I did have to slow down on my reading. I read about 100 books a year. I think I'm at 120 this year. But I was reading like 350 when I was pregnant and before I wrote. And I think the main thing was before I was writing, all my writing time was my reading time. I would read all night long, and now I write all night long. So it goes through phases. I have to take a break from writing to fill my cup, and then I can get back to it. So. All right, what was your
That's
second
great.
question?
Thank you very much. That was great. My
You're
second
welcome.
question has to do with, a lot of times business coaches, and I don't know anything about the author world, but I'm guessing it would be the same thing. They tell you to create your ideal client avatar. How old
Mhm.
are they? Do they have kids? Like, I don't know, what books do they read? What, all these things about the client that, your ideal client. I'm wondering if you do the same thing as an author. And I'm curious, who is your ideal reader? And do you have to change that for every book? And then also, to piggyback on that question, how do you market? Because you have so many, how do you have a following? Because I guess I always thought that people had, again, I don't know much about the author end of it, they all do rom-coms, so then that's their following. All of their, people that follow them is because they like rom-coms, or if they're fantasy writers, all of their readers are fantasy. Since you do so, historical fiction, rom-coms, and fantasy, do you have different client or no, I'm sorry, reader avatars? And I guess the reason I even thought of this before, because I thought of this question before the call. I
Mhm.
thought of it when I was reading the book, because the first half of the book, she kept saying she was a spinster, she was a spinster, she was a spinster. She kept saying that, and I'm like, okay, she's 24 and she's a spinster. That was like, I was like, wow, I wonder if her ideal reader is someone that's really obsessed with, I'm 24 and I'm not married yet. But then the second half of the book, the word didn't come up at all. So, so,
Mhm.
so that's why I was curious about. So then that's what made me wonder, like, who is your ideal reader? Sorry, that was kind of a long way to ask the
No,
question, but
that's okay. I love that question. So I'm going to explain every heart prepare a little bit. So the first part, that's her main issue, is she's like, I am old. Nobody's falling in love with me. But then once she kind of gets into this relationship with Leroy, she doesn't really care anymore. It's not on the forefront of her mind because she's realized that like he's interested in me, I'm interested in him. My age doesn't matter. I'm more concerned about what God wants. And so these labels that other people put on me, I'm not worried about them anymore. So that was kind of the vibe of like she's really worried about all these external factors, and then by the end, she's really more worried about following Heavenly Father's plan. So that was that story. But my ideal reader, yes, I do have kind of an idea of who that is. So the first thing is I can see my analytics on my social media. I can see what ages interact with my content the most. Most of the time, I have people between the ages of 25 to 45 interacting with my content. I also know that most readers who read rom-com specifically are moms with young children who don't have money to buy paperbacks. And so they read in Kindle Unlimited. And so a lot of my social media marketing is like, hey, this book, you can read it for free in Kindle Unlimited because I know that you're a young mom like myself who is on a budget and can only do like the $12.99 subscription every month. Like you don't have the money to buy a paperback or to buy every ebook that comes out. And so that's kind of the ideal for my rom-coms. I also know that my ideal audience is also women aged 20 to 65 who want clean books, who want Christian themes, and who want um, just things to make them laugh, things that make them happy at the end of the book. So happily ever afters. So I did put a lot of hardship into Every Heart Prepare. In my rom-coms, there is hardship, not as heavy as Every Heart Prepare. Every Heart Prepare was a little bit more gritty for me to write. Um, and so that's kind of my ideal reader with just my romance books in general. I do tend to market to women who have given up reading spicy books and who are looking for clean books, and for moms who have teenage girls that they want safe books to give to those teenage girls. Because as a teenager, I read spicy books not on purpose. I fell into it because my mom was sick and she gave me a Kindle for Christmas, and I got free books on the Kindle, and she couldn't monitor that and I just ended up reading spicy. And so by the time I was in college, it got pretty bad for me, and then I was able to give it up and just read clean from then on out. But that's my ideal reader is those on social media is those women who are searching for clean romances because they're tired of being inundated by spicy books from traditional publishers and from the publishing world. And so similarly, same thing with my fantasy is that I'm looking for those clean readers, looking for those women who have given up spice. I'm looking for women aged 25 to 45 who love fairy tales, because mine are fairy tale mashups right now. And just who want that escape. A lot of moms with young kids, they want to be able to read a book during nap time. That's what my books are for. And so it's aimed a lot towards women like myself, my age, my kind of demographic. But I also know, like, I purposely made a large print copy of Every Heart Prepare because I know that my grandma loves it. And I know that there are women in my ward who would love to read this, but they can't because of the eyesight, right? Because they want the bigger font. And so that's why I made it a large print because I knew that there was a better market for historical fiction. Um, Women over the age of 40 tend to read more historical fiction than they do romantic comedies. And so I know that that's more of that target audience. So from Instagram and social media, I've been able to see kind of numbers and genders and stuff like that, but also just from who interacts with my content. I know a lot of like who's looking for it. So,
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I do have one question now that
yeah.
you said that. I didn't realize that's very smart. The way, well, again, it goes to all of your knowledge behind the scenes. It's very smart that you're saying about Kindle because they're moms that have young kids and they can't afford to keep buying more and more paperback books, right? Well, if
Hmm.
people are buying them or getting them for free on Kindle, how do you make money? Because in the beginning of the
Oh,
call, you mentioned at the beginning of the call that there's a bigger investment. When Deb had asked you about
hmm.
self-publishing, you said, yes, there's a bigger investment when you first start out, but then you said afterwards, there's a bigger return. But if they're getting it for
Hmm.
free on Kindle, I don't understand how it's a bigger return.
Let me explain Kindle Unlimited. It's awesome. Some authors don't like it, but I love it. So Kindle Unlimited, what happens is that a person's subscription, their $12.99, goes into this big pot that Amazon gets every month. And then what Amazon does is they pay an author per page that is read of their book. So each page is 0.004 cents. So say my big one, Winning My Queen, this is about 300 pages. And so 300 times 0.004, I'm making $1.50 to $2 if they read it in Kindle Unlimited. And so it's not the same exact royalty rate as if they bought an ebook or a paperback, but it's better than nothing. And so a lot of my money comes from Kindle Unlimited page reads. And so when you upload your book to Amazon, you have a dashboard that shows you like how many ebooks are bought, how many paperbacks, and then how many pages of your books are read every day. And so then those pages add up and it makes you money throughout the month as all the pages are added up. So women who pay $12.99 a month for their Kindle Unlimited subscription, if they read 3 or 4 books a month, then everything else they read is basically free because that would be the price of 3 or 4 ebooks if they had bought 4 ebooks, $12.99, same price. So I get money and they get to read it for free, if that makes sense. So I love Kindle Unlimited for that reason because when I binge a book, I'll read like 8 in a row and I don't have to buy the ebook, but I know the author's getting paid and it makes me happy. So,
Each
Thank you so
author
much. That's fascinating. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing.
right?
Yeah, each author then decides whether they're going to put their book in Kindle Unlimited because it's kind of an exclusive rights deal
Mm-hmm.
with Kindle for having ebooks. So if they choose to put it in Kindle Unlimited, then they can get paid per page read and people who want it. But some authors choose not to. And then if you wanted to buy an ebook, you would just buy the ebook, but you couldn't do that under the subscription model. So yeah, it's
Yep.
kind of like paying for a special library card or something like,
Mhm.
you
I
know,
treat it like a library card.
yeah.
It's my personal library card because all the books I want to read aren't usually in libraries because they are exclusive to Kindle Unlimited. So like I can't put my book on Chirp or Nook or whatever other ones. It's just in Kindle Unlimited, my ebook. Um, I can put my paperback other places, but not the ebook. And so it's really nice for me personally because I do use Kindle Unlimited because I can't afford to buy everybody's books. And so I read them knowing that my author friends are still getting paid, even if it's not like the full amount. So that's why I market it that way because I know that there's a lot of other women like myself who are on a fixed budget and can only do this. And so it's like, I got you, you know? Anyways.
Yeah, and it is kind of like a library system too, where you're checking them out and you can only have so many on your Kindle Unlimited dashboard as a reader. And then if you want to check out another one and you have too many, you have to return something. So they don't stay on there forever, only as long as you keep them. So yeah, it's an
Yep.
interesting program, but I use it a lot too because I read a lot of books too.
When you're reading 360 books a year, it's really nice. I
Well, I
saved a
don't
lot of
read
money.
that many, but I'm probably in the 70 to 100 per year range. And Elda, I'd be curious, do you know how many books you read a year? She has a library card, though. She gets a lot from the library, but she's a big reader.
Yeah, yeah, I'll have like 15 from the library in 1 month. So, I took myself off of Goodreads because it was too much. But the last year that I was on Goodreads, it was 165.
Wow.
Um, so
Yeah, that's a lot of books.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, we're getting to the top of the hour, but before we end, I was curious if you had any authors that have been influencers to you, that they've influenced your writing style or your career, authors that maybe you could recommend to us, because we're always looking for new authors to read.
Yes, absolutely. Um, Probably one of the most influential rom-com authors for me was Kate Watson. I adore her. She's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and she's in Arizona. And she just writes these really beautiful romantic comedies that are so witty, but she also includes like so much emotional healing. I don't think I haven't cried while reading one of hers. And when I first joined and first started writing, she was just so encouraging to me, and we would chat quite often. She'd be like, "How you feeling today?" I'm like, "Imposter syndrome's the worst." And she's like, "I get you." So she's just has taken me under her wing in that aspect, and I adore her books. Um, Fantasy books, I don't know if you guys read fantasy, but Jeff Wheeler is like amazing, and he's really become a mentor to me. He's taken me under his little fantasy author wing. And we've been able to meet up several times, and it's so funny. Like, I know his nephew, and my dad taught his nephew in seminary, and we've just been able to find all these like family connections. It's hilarious. But he writes fantasy books, and in his fantasy books, his magic systems are faith-based, and he has kind of a savior deity as well in the universe that he's created. And so any Jeff Wheeler book is phenomenal, in my opinion. Trying to think. Who are some other ones? Oh, Shauna and Bessie. She's awesome. Her historical fictions really inspire me. Like, I don't read historical a lot anymore. I kind of binged them all and then I got burnt out a few years back. But I will read a Shauna and Bessie book anytime. And she is so sweet. And she's just like a little cheerleader. She'll just like, "You're doing great, Madeline." And I'm like, "Thanks, Shauna." So. Those are three I think you ladies would probably enjoy. I love all of those authors so much. So,
Wonderful. Thanks. And we would love to know, where is the best place to connect with you? And we also want to encourage everybody who read the book to review it on Amazon or wherever you picked up a copy, because reviews are really important to authors. But then where is the best place to connect with you? Do you have an email that you send out, or?
I do. So I have a newsletter that I send out. Well, it's usually twice a month. I've been sending them out more recently because I've been part of a multi-author series. But my newsletter is probably one of the best places to connect with me. I put in little tidbits about what I'm writing, author tips, funny things that my children say. I think that's everyone's favorite part because my kids are hilarious. So my newsletters, I have a romance one and I have a fantasy one. You can find those in the back of the book. There's a QR code or a link that you can click. You can find me on social media. I always will respond to Instagram messages. I'm not super active on Facebook. It just auto posts from Instagram there. So if you see me on Facebook, I won't see your comment for like a week, but you can find me on there. And then yeah, newsletter, Instagram, Facebook.
Yeah.
I'm all the places.
All
And yeah,
right.
best place to get my book is Amazon, but I did just list all of them on Closed Door Romance's bookstore, and all those books are closed door. And so if you want a signed copy, that's where I have them listed for that.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time this evening. It has been wonderful to get to know you and your author journey, and your prolific writing is just phenomenal, amazing. You're inspiring, how much you read and how much you write and still take care of little people. That's just remarkable. So thank
We're
you for,
surviving.
yes, sometimes on frozen pizzas and mac and cheese, probably, but that's okay. So thank you again for being here, Madeline.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. This was awesome.